Amagi Brilliant Park is all in all a creative premise that is a contrivance for interesting stories, brimming with fun that rides a long way on its charmingly surreal jokes that are executed with real energy, and a general low-key sense of snark that keeps momentum high, while simultaneously being backed by Kyoto Animation's amazingly detailed visuals. The plot is loosely put together and poorly executed on due to many self-contained comedy episodes that didn't really affect the main plot of saving the park, but it's more narrative-focused episodes were a real treat, and it's not like those couple lesser episodes didn't make use of all their unique elements at their disposal, such as the setting and the supernatural bits, and it fed those elements into one another naturally to allow for the introduction of new comedy ingredients every episode, and the fact that it's so confident in its formula allowed for the jokes to build naturally out of the characters and the circumstances of their world, making its boundless likability exude at all times. Also, did I mention Latifah? She's waifu material. Ah, Latifah!
Yeah, hey, could you stop calling me your waifu?
But...
It's really disgusting.
Hold on right there. I'll do as you say. You're my waifu after all.
Oh, for fuck's sake, you fucking weeb.
Huh?
Glenn, I have a dick.
Amagi was definitely bogged down by its midsection, and the story can't really be called well-structured, but again, the story in Amagi is more a vehicle for the fun than the actual goal. Yet it never forgets that goal throughout all the fun, and that's the word that just came to define Amagi. Fun. Maybe it's not the right kind of fun for everyone, but it worked brilliantly for me, more so than almost anything else I saw this season, and I just loved it. I wouldn't be surprised if it worked for you too. The most simple way to describe the Seven Deadly Sins is that it's a fun, unassuming adventure with a set of simple but endearing characters, and it does very little to mess with that formula, which works, for the most part. The simplicity works well, largely because it's strong in action-adventure fundamentals, and the first of those tentpole strengths is the show's characters. Its main cast isn't terribly complex, but they bounce off each other well, and the characters gain texture through the conflicts conjured up from a runaway princess, who stumbles all over her own land gathering the infamous Seven Deadly Sins to save her country on the edge of turmoil. And these Seven Deadly Sins, I'm sure you know of them, are made up of the Sis-con, the Lolly-con, the Shotokan. Those weren't the sins they were talking about. Oh.
You have a warrant for your arrest.
Not again. After a long, cold night in the dark, dirty jail cell with Vito, they call him Fat Vito, actually, and him caressing me while calling me his waifu, I'm back! And, the Seven Deadly Sins is unrestrained, completely self-indulgent thrill-seeking for the sake of delivering shock and sensation, and while that's fun and all, its breakneck speed and lack of desperately needed emotional beats means the show never quite reaches the sense of weight and drama it deserves. But despite being all too familiar with a lot of its story elements, it still manages to impress by possessing great confidence and moving effortlessly between its core styles. And then the stellar fight scenes make it all worth it, with exchanges of blows feeling kinetic, like there's an actual weight to the characters' bodies, and the stakes and relevant variables always clear enough for the audience to be in the loop. It's rarely boring, and that's something that deserves to be praised. But a major problem would be that its themes seem reflective of a worldview too young to be very insightful, and is even more so cheapened by a clunky narrative that paints its themes with too broad of simplistic strokes. But otherwise, if you're looking for a wild, beautifully articulated, wide-scale adventure, you could do a whole lot worse than the Seven Deadly Sins. Taking place within a fantasy setting where the combined efforts of mankind, gods, and demons have successfully sealed away the world-destroying Bahamut, Shingeki no Bahamut Genesis houses the great guest of beautiful animation, an engaging world, a lively cast of characters, and a high-speed, contagious sense of fun and invention. It takes all the jumbled variables of a classic fantasy adventure, shakes them together, and lays them out with the expert care of a Hollywood master. The reason I even bother mentioning Hollywood is because its shot framing choices seem more reminiscent of Hollywood blockbusters than most anime. And I'm just getting started on Bahamut. Bahamut is jam-packed with personality. I mean, it has giant dragons, golems, infamous demons, gods long forgotten, lolly zombie necromancers, and oh my god, is that a cute girl with dogs for hands? Whoa. If Bahamut wanted to, it could effortlessly fill 3 different shows with all of the personality and energy it puts out on display. Sure, it can be a bit silly and ridiculous, but how can you not love it for that? It just put a color on this style and absolutely owns it with a plot that's simple and easy to follow, but empowers it through its brilliant execution and ever-escalating set pieces. And then it's also an incredibly generous show in that its foremost desire is to allow the audience to experience the same exhilaration and joy that its characters do, and man, is that experience second to none. Of course, Bahamut's ups aren't without its downs. Bahamut's second half unfortunately can't compare to the opening salvo, as the show gets bogged down in generic fantasy dramatics and loses both its creative edge and top-tier production quality. Bahamut ultimately didn't amount to the action-adventure masterpiece it might have promised, but it was still an enjoyable and unique show, and it was nice to see it off in such fine fashion with that lovable, adventuresome flair it never abandoned. And hopefully sometime in the near future, we'll get to Bahamut to the max again. Danchigai, the simplistic comedy that captured my heart. It doesn't have outstanding animation, insightful themes, or really anything complex about it at all. It was just a simple comedy that, well, made me laugh. And sometimes, that's just all it takes. Likeable characters and a nice feel are just icing on the fact that Danchigai is really, really funny. It nails broad slapstick humor, great comedic timing, hilarious character interactions. Basically, everything it goes for, it nails. I won't say every joke works, but every episode works on the whole. It makes use of each character's personality to construct comedy that builds itself up naturally without heavily relying on simple, random, forced humor. The whole show constantly has this natural sense of humor that generally avoids the need for actual jokes. Characters just act naturally silly or awkward, and the end result is a bunch of scenes that come off as inherently charming, and it just feels so damn cozy, mainly due to the genuine feeling of the atmosphere. The close-knit group of friends that are the characters really sell it. Every episode was a new adventure with the characters and didn't just abuse the same joke over and over. It's not a weighty show, but if you're looking for a good time, you could do a whole lot worse. Also, maybe I should acknowledge the fact that many people seem to dislike how it sometimes panders exclusively to anime fans with tons of in-jokes that you may not understand if you're not fully into the fandom. But are you honestly surprised that I like the show as much as I do? I'm probably the biggest fucking weeb you watch on YouTube. And I'm not entirely sure if that's something to be proud of, but it's true. Probably. And also, it takes place in a manga light novel doujin store, so yeah, what do you expect? And I guess you could say that I'm also the audience it's pandering to, so of course I really liked it. Regardless, Danchigai is a good time all around. Featuring solid characterization, regularly understated dialogue, and a keen understanding of the rules of drama, Zoro Method ended up becoming one of my favorites of the fall, mainly due to the nice subtle blend of fantasy and realism. And not to mention, this is totally Yuri.
No, Glenn, it isn't.
But
you see things that others don't. Just look, you have Yuri vision.
I can't accept that! I won't accept that! We are gay! Why is there even a male character? This is Yuri! We don't need heterosexuality! We are gay anime girls! But that's forbidden love! That's why it's great! Girls with girls is the absolute best! And we are all totally gay for each other! Yuri is the best! You weebs! Did she just call us weebs? And while my viewpoint can indeed sometimes be that narrow, Zoro Method is just a really well-done drama. It breaks from convention in a number of ways, elevating its tired and true premise through great personality and excellent execution, offering a very warm introduction to its world for any new viewer. Its excellent character writing draws the audience into the discussion, achieving the impressive feat of allowing the audience to simultaneously explore the issues brought up themselves, while watching the characters make their own judgments and decisions. Their realizations and struggles form the backbone of each character's own stories that add to the fantastic conclusion of the main narrative, while making none of their personal inputs feel arbitrary to that narrative. Which, by the way, still left enough time for one of the most satisfying epilogues ever. I mean, its narrative plotting is sometimes thin and always tinged with a bit of absurdity, but its emotional resonance is absolutely solid, because the show is very good at fully articulating characters and then bringing them through journeys that totally rearrange their values, while still having them feel like the same person, as though they're real, and that allows for a real connection with them all. Some of the plot twists were a bit predictable, but I feel as though that might have been intentional to help us fully understand the harshness of those twists. And I'm doing the thing where I go on for too long about one single aspect. Zoro Method is not just all drama. It's also extremely heartwarming and funny, and overall the humor is well placed and balanced with the more serious moments. To wrap it all up, Zoro Method portrayed some of the best low-key drama of the year, and gave us a way to understand everyone in the show, which is a true achievement. Based on a classic manga from the early 90s and produced by the regularly brilliant Madhouse, Parasyte started off as a show that was seemingly focused on horror, action, Shinichi's character journey, and the overarching theme of what defines human nature. Though the horror elements have somewhat dwindled through repetition and the show's generally neutral direction, the other three elements have stayed strong pillars of this series about alien parasites invading Earth and taking up the appearance of humans. Succeeding both as a general commentary on human nature and a specific story relevant to a specific world is no small task. And Parasyte actually makes that challenge a strength, with its personal threads regarding one's humanity and self-worth accumulating in one of the most powerful themes of the show. The relationship created between rationality, humanity, and animal instinct was complicated purposefully in interesting ways as the narrative and parasites themselves continued to evolve. But there's one element that Parasyte constantly failed at: the majority of its characters. The dehumanization of Shinichi and his struggle to hold on to what remains of his humanity, partnered with Miji's slow development of understanding humanity, is easily the most interesting part of Parasyte, but their developments took priority over everyone else, and made almost every other character more of stepping stools than actual engaging characters. You can be the cool thriller all you want, Parasyte, but not emotionally investing the viewer will keep you as just that, a cool thriller. And that's what Parasyte ended up being. And I'm completely fine with that because it still makes use of its solid premise to a decent degree and manages its themes on the nature of humanity well enough, while wrapping it all up into something like a really screwed up superhero type story. Overall, though I think the show could have benefited from a little revision, its ideas were plentiful and creative. They even reflected off each other in compelling ways, and they were generally well articulated. But it just never evolved into its full potential, and that was just disappointing. And just really quick, just, how does Shinichi, with his hand being like, what if he's a righty? Would it be a blowjob at that point? Or, you know what, just forget I mentioned it. Yeah, just forget it. Parasyte, solid thriller, carried by its strong source material, definitely worth a watch. Shirobako is real, and I like things that are real. Since I'm a young adult still figuring out what he wants to do with the rest of his life, and an anime fan with tons of knowledge about the industry and culture, Shirobako strikes a good chord with me. One of Shirobako's major themes is the uncertainty about the future. You're always figuring out who you are, new things about yourself, and what you want to do with your life. It tells this through the employees at an anime production company and their daily struggles. Shirobako balances nerdy passion and dreadful realism. Though it does favor optimism, it never lets itself stray too far into it. Since the show is willing to address actual problems with starting a career, I think it's allowed to be optimistic. I think Shirobako's ultimate goal is encouraging young people to not give up on their dreams, but trying to be a little bit more realistic about it than other inspirational dramas. It's one of the few stories I've run into that's been able to really capture the feeling of natural conversations between friends, and partially because of that, it's extremely good at humanizing people through their faults. If you like people, you'll probably like Shirobako. They feel like people, but the show is not about specific personal journeys. All of the characters possess solid personalities while still essentially acting as touchstones for various elements of professional life in the process of engaging with the challenges, compromises, and small victories of adulthood. I wouldn't go as far as saying it's too real though, as the show cushions job stress with good humor and some fluffy optimism, but it's certainly more honest about the real world than almost anything else I've seen. Shirobako also has wonderfully energetic storytelling, a broad and engaging cast of characters, and an effortless way of integrating its drama with its real-world world building. Though there are occasional messages here and there, its thematic weight leans more on the naturalism of its world and conflicts than on any central point. It glorifies everyday drama and celebrates the small triumphs of everyday life with a gracefully sketched, simple story. And if you're at all interested in the creation process of anime, Shirobako is a great and fun way to start your studies. Also known as, please watch it, too many fans have barely any knowledge on the creation process, and that's just really sad to me. But to wrap it up, Shirobako nails the balance of bitter and sweet, and the bitter's never been so sweet. Now, I'm not going to be one of those guys who always says the source material is better, but I'll actually surprise you and tell you that the Fate Stay Night visual novel isn't some masterpiece. It has a massive array of issues like obsessive world building, through boring, uncreative exposition that overshadows many of the good aspects of Fate, the bad prose, terrible inner monologues, and oh my god, I love it so much. But man, it's not perfect. But nothing really is. And, surprisingly, the anime adaptation by Ufotable actually fixed a lot of the issues. It even added a bit of original content and cut the exposition down quite a bit to make it much better than I expected. The story hasn't been significantly altered at all, but the change in format and the changes to the plot have fixed many of the original issues I had with the story, but definitely not all of them. There's also just a new, nice chemistry to the group. Rin talks circles around Shiro, Shiro gets flustered and defensive, Saber likes food. Scenes like these ones, which demonstrate the lovely chemistry between these teenagers stuck in the Holy Grail War, do far more to humanize Shiro's philosophy than any silly debates with Archer. And it feels as though they truly made this adaptation for me. Also, not disregarding that Rin became a much more fleshed out character. Rin. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard that Fate Stay Night is actually an eroge, and I thought I'd tell you the tale of how Rin truly got fleshed out. Now, where is it? Oh, here we are. Now just take a seat by the fire and bask in the glow of the amazing writing of Fate Stay Night. Her lewdness is a great nightmare. Her anus is defenseless. It contracts every time I move, looking like a second reproductive opening. Tosaka's anus. The dirtiest part of her is right in front of me. Sorry about that. Where was I? Oh yeah. Not only did this adaptation smooth over the worst part of the writing and characterization from the visual novel, but it's also conjuring from nothing the narrative's best strength, its engaging action scenes. When all the players are revealed, the narrative clashes into an exploration of morality and each character's personal philosophies. It allows Fate to demonstrate some real sensitivity, and also gives justification to its fights and makes them more weighted. And let me tell you, Fate Stay Night is all about justifying these fights, and keeps its story to the fundamentals of a very small number of characters developing and bouncing off each other to make it all the more easier. And the show is just undeniably gorgeous, and the fights have a great sense of weight in spite of their fantastical nature, and the episodes just constantly fly by. Fate Stay Night is a tremendous popcorn show, especially with all of the original material strength being completely front-loaded. There's still obviously the classic Fate onslaught of exposition, but it's scattered between the really captivating fight scenes, and the character work here is top-notch. Both Shiro and Rin feel like echoes of their parents and compelling unique individuals at the same time, making this adaptation interesting both as a comment on Fate Zero and a character story in its own right. The Type Moon universe is an extremely interesting place with some cool ideas that I love to see explored, and this adaptation is a welcome addition to that universe. Life continues to constantly move despite your feelings. This is ritually drawn by the story of the piano prodigy Kosei, who can no longer hear the sounds of his piano after his mother passes away, at least until the erratic violinist Kaori breaks down the door into Kosei's life to bring color to his monotone world. And the story goes on from there with blazing speed, and it makes no apologies. Its story barrels through the gates with all haste, and it's utterly in love with its own wonderful visual aesthetic. And the show's themes are constant and empowering. The show succeeds as a well-articulated expression of its core ideas draped in a vivid and tightly written genre shell. Its protagonists are layered, flawed, and human, filled with weaknesses and insecurities. And the beautiful performances reflect those layers, with each conversation being both lined with subtext and reflective of an actual understanding of chemistry and banter. The conflicts build in slowly gathering refrains, pulling together character arcs and then shattering in small climaxes only to rebuild again. But for something to rebuild, something has to falter, as the show does. A lot, such as how it jumps frenetically between tones and styles, and how well it transitions between its completely different tones is inconsistent, and can really ruin some of the moments meant to be heavy-hitting. It just felt so messy at times. And the out-of-place comedy was really jarring, and rarely actually accomplished its job of being, well, funny. And the biggest stumble during Your Lie in April's performance was its issue of adding more. Just adding more. More characters, more story threads that just had little relevance to the already existing ones, and it just refused to let them go. It didn't negatively affect the existing threads, but it just left an unsatisfied taste in my mouth. But like the points I listed before, Your Lie in April still has a lot going for it. The show's use of music is appropriately deft and empowering. Even the exuberant, sometimes poetry-like dialogue works. It's certainly heightened as can be, but in the context of this show's aesthetic tone, that's actually quite appropriate. Overall, I'd say this show's weaknesses are just inconsequential in light of its strengths. And there's no lack of ambition, and it's great to be there when it knocks it out of the park, because there's some absolute poetry to the execution of all its threads that it manages to conclude. From the first note to the last, Your Lie in April never stopped playing the distinctive score that it was. Beautiful. What is it to be a hero? Heroes fight for good and challenge evil to change the world, but is the world really so black and white? No, it isn't. The world is far too complicated for these simple ideals of justice, and Yuki Yuna constantly turns those weak ideals over on their head, never leaving the overbearing feeling of melancholy too far behind. Focusing on the Hero Club as they deal with the mysterious beings from the Vertex, Yuki Yuna chose the bold and purposeful choice of having a standard series of rises and falls. It was basically a long, even descent into codependency, with the story just getting more stifling until it reached a breaking point just before the end. Yuki Yuna wasn't so much representing its genre, but exploring it in great detail. The writing, the direction, the visual design, the sound design, it had every show I was watching beaten in nearly every single category. And not just because of the heavily implied Yuri undertones, I know you're thinking that, I know you are, but that was definitely a plus, definitely a plus. The world is rich, evocative, and beautiful. The themes are poignant and well layered into the narrative, the characters are relatable, distinctive, and dynamic, and each episode is speckled with moments and sequences that just left me in awe. Very little is directly explained to the audience most of the time, the characters simply express the details of the world in the natural flow of conversation and events. This is how world building should be. I don't want a show to tell me about its world, I want a show to take me there, like Yuki Yuna did. It achieved this by constructing itself as basically a jigsaw puzzle. The show dumps out a bunch of puzzle pieces, you get maybe a dozen new ones every episode. They start off as mysterious but compelling fragments and eventually assemble into a complex, breathtaking picture. Each individual episode worked as a twisted, distinctively written, powerfully directed vignette while also contributing to the whole. It was both extremely dense idea-wise and disarmingly heavy-handed in execution, and it all combined to reveal the undying representation of what all the series' brightest moments point to. The fact that, in spite of our world being a cruel, inescapable one, a world constructed of cycles we cannot escape, we will always try. We will always struggle for others if not for ourselves. For everybody's sake, we'll be heroes. Because the world needs heroes. And Yuki Yuna was one of the heroes of this fall season in 2014. Woo! That was a long one, huh? Hey guys, Glenn here, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like or comment, or even subscribe if you haven't already. This one ended up being a lot longer than I wanted it to be, but what are you gonna do? At least I had fun making it. Make sure to follow me on the Twitters, or like me on the Facebooks if you want updates on upcoming videos, or if you just want to chat with me. Anyways, thanks for watching, see you guys next time.